The challenge in terms of people not understanding the nature of AI, I think because with the chatbots, you give that illusion that it's very easy to use and you can just chat with it, ask it to do anything. But the underlying model is a lot harder to understand.
I saw your podcast. You were absolutely amazing. So I have at least somebody who's super experienced on my side.
I look forward to chatting with you and learning about what you do and how you have what your journey has been like, actually. Yeah,
it's been a very exciting journey, and it's keep getting more exciting by the minute. So it's I feel like I chose the right industry. Even back then people were super excited about AI. Now, because AI has become accessible to so many people, then even this conversation about what I do and what I do for a living has become so accessible, and everybody wants to participate in that conversation. I remember even back then when I used to tell people, like when I was doing the image classification for cancer detection using AI, that was like maybe 7-8 years ago. When I used to say this to people used to say like, oh my God, and people felt intimidated to talk about that topic, especially if they were not really into tech. But nowadays, because people work with ChatGPT, they've been exposed to AI, what possibilities are there? I see everybody wants to participate in that conversation. And it's so exciting because then you can talk about your work and then people are just listening and they kind of somehow understand now how things work because they kind of work with it, regardless of age.
Yeah. Uh-huh. What's the most common misunderstanding of AI? I mean, both from your work experience and on the podcast. Like, what is the biggest myth that people have about AI?
Biggest myth is like AI is magic. For example, from my work, I get so many requests. It's like, okay, so we need to do this, and I need you to do your magic using the magical tool, which is AI. That was even before like ChatGPT and generative AI. So people always saw it as a black box. People always thought it's like it can do wonders. So the expectation was either too high or too low. It was never like kind of the expectation was never on point. So it was always our job to maybe set down the expectation whenever the threshold was super high. And whenever I hear the word like, okay, do your magic, it was always a conversation where I had to say like, there's no magic. If the data has what the model needs, then the outcome is going to be correct. But if what you're trying to achieve with the model is not included in the data, then the model cannot do the magic. So it was always like this education that we had to go back and forward with, especially with business people, for example. That was always something that was one of the main challenges that I personally faced. Nowadays, I feel the challenges are just so different. There's people who are really excited about AI, Gen AI, but like even developers, including myself, every time I see a new model has been produced, there's a little bit uncertainty, a little bit fear. Is like, okay, like it's getting really, really good at, for example, code generation. Like at what point is it going to be possible to fully automate my job without the need for me, or fully automate artists or stuff like this? So even somebody who's been working with this technology for so long, I get this uncertainty. So I can also imagine that other people facing similar challenges.
It's interesting because unlike you, I'm quite new to AI. I only started really learning more about it when I started researching and writing the book. So I have two co-authors. One of them is someone like you, he has a PhD in AI. The other one is an AI risk governance expert. So he's the one who's worried about everything that can go wrong. So I think my journey in AI has probably only been the past 2 years or so, maybe two and a quarter years. So I'm coming to it fresh, as a creative person, a filmmaker, have a lot of experience in innovation, but not with AI per se. So it's been quite interesting for me to learn about it, because I think that the funny story about how the book was getting written was we started writing the book before ChatGPT came out. So a few months into the writing of the book, ChatGPT was launched, and wasn't quite sure looking back whether it was the best thing that ever happened to us or the worst thing that can ever happen to us. The best thing as in, there's so much more interest in AI now. the worst thing is that, oh no, the expectations are so high. We have to rush out the book and answer all the questions because the interest in it is like 10 or 20 times before we started the book. So I definitely hear you. And I also see the challenge in terms of people not understanding the nature of AI. I think because with the chatbots, you give that illusion that it's very easy to use and you can just chat with it, ask it to do anything. But the underlying model is a lot harder to understand, right? You need to understand what the limitations are, what you can be very good at. So one example is really the fact that like the people complain about the hallucination and the factual errors, but actually that's also the feature of ChatGPT or large language models in the sense that it can surprise you because it's just kind of generating many different outcomes, right? It's not judgmental about the outcomes, and therefore, in terms of if you make the models much more I guess, aligned, it can also become less interesting creatively, right? Because we just kind of give you the correct answers. So I think what you're sharing in terms of expectations is very interesting because there's this exuberance and optimism about AI, but it's also coming from a place of sometimes misunderstanding, right? People expect it to do too much. They don't understand what it does well and don't understand how to collaborate with it. And also, I sense that, let me ask you, you talked about how maybe many parts of your job can be automated. Do you think that's true, or do you think there's a way in which you can still create value?
So the thing is that I noticed, even when you do what you need to do, the thing is, the only thing that is also missing is this human aspect. Let's say at the moment, AI can really do code generation very well. And it's something that we've been using to improve our productivity. Now we reached a stage where we can pick up any project so easily without hesitating because we know we have like some sort of a sparring partner on our side. So maybe let me go how I used to do my job before AI. If I would read, for example, some papers, or I would read some blogs or stuff like this that I need to understand, or I need to read some documentation about something that I need to integrate in my software, there was always, you read something, but you cannot ask questions about it. There's this like very natural flow of talking to a teacher. It's like, explain this to me. I didn't understand that part. Like, how does this part work? How does this part work? So for me, that was what now AI is being able to do. So this became like this teacher where I would ask questions, clarification questions, and then the information sticks better. And that part has AI helped a lot. Regarding automation, I see that, okay, AI can write really good code, but then you need somebody. There's a very interesting quote going on in social media is that if the client knows what they want to build, then we would have been replaced. But in our experience, whenever we're working with people from business, with stakeholders, they kind of want to do something. They're not sure what it is. And then they need somebody to talk to and then advise them what is the right thing to do. And not only that, and then that person needs to know how to build it. So, and also not know how to build it, but know how to maintain it. So that's why I see, at least for the next maybe 5 years, AI by itself cannot replace programmers because you need somebody not only just, let's say, generating code, writing a website, writing a web app, but the person needs to understand what's going on, especially when things go wrong, because we know software is buggy and these models, sometimes they hallucinate, sometimes they create like wrong code or whatever it is. And unfortunately, it's still the case that most of the code they write has some bugs in it or is untrue. So it's very good, but it's still not But I assume with time, this is going to get much better. But the problem is somebody needs to be there who has knowledge. What is this thing being written to be able to steer it in the right direction? So at the moment, I cannot see AI overtaken fully, but I see people using AI becoming more productive than people not using AI. I think this is now the main difference that has become.
It's interesting because in our book, AI for Humanity, we write about how that you need this what we call human AI symbiotic intelligence. That means that human and AI have to work together in tandem. So like because I think one of the things is that we write about is really that you have to hold a trust, right? You as the client manager, project manager, coding expert, engineer has to build and hold the trust with the clients, right? Because the clients, they're reacting to the circumstances around them, right? For example, I don't know what it's like in Germany, but I worked in China for many years, and in China, things are always changing, right? So you cannot expect your client to stay with their brief. It might be changing. Maybe their bosses change their minds. There are external things that happen. So I think the human factor is very important in terms of holding the trust, navigating the complexity of the real world, like with the different stakeholders, as you said. But I think also in terms of the oversight, right, the containment, right? Maybe the mistakes or the hallucination only happen 1% of the time, but the cost and the impact could be much greater, right? Both in terms of bad publicity, the erosion of trust and things like that. So I think in a way, I find that you still need to have the human at the center of it, right? In terms of just managing the relationships in the real world and also kind of containing the AI and nurturing and guiding the AI.
I totally agree with you. And I also have like some personal experiences where at the moment everybody's super excited about image generation, for example. You can generate some really, really cool stuff using AI without really having any artistic knowledge. All what you need is natural text. You can describe what you want. And even if you cannot describe it so well, now most websites have integrated prompt enhancers. So you can describe what you want, and then this prompt enhancer would enhance the way you describe what you want for the model. And funny enough, I was trying to redesign a logo for my podcast. So this is maybe a personal experience. And the first solution that came to my mind is like, okay, let's make Gen AI create it, right? And I do there and I play around and I get some nice examples. And somehow I show it to people. And what the feedback I'm getting is like people are not resonating with this. Like, for example, just simply using Gen AI without this human touch somehow feels empty to people and is coming across as unauthentic. So what I ended up doing actually is going and consulting with a lot of artists. I know some people from my connections. One time I was in a wedding, funny enough, and I was showing different logos to an artist that I met in the wedding. And then you see like these advices, it's way more valuable, and it's not actually generating the art, but it's everything around it. It's this conversation. It's like, what are you trying to achieve? What if you add like this word here? What if you add this logo here? Also like to generate ideas. Like if you have a very good idea and you just want something really quick, Gen AI can really help you. But if you maybe unsure what you want humans to consult you. This is where I still see like artists and everybody around that is still in highly use. And I also heard some stories where artists is now could be also using AI for some inspirations or to just creating different templates. So it's also working as a sparring partner for artists. But I think you're the right person to talk to when it comes to that. How do you see this manifesting?
Oh, I think that I hear you. I think I see that from artistic point of view, I think that I think as a filmmaker, I've always known that the work, that whether it's a film or a book or a podcast, is completed by the audience, right? The audience will collaborate with you or finish the story, right? So that's the magic of story, right? If you make a film or you produce a podcast and no one ever listens to it or no one ever watches the film, then the film or the podcast doesn't really it's not never completed. So I think that the main thing about generative AI is that it only does one part of the job, which is to generate one version of the work, right? Whereas I think what you did in terms of going around the weddings and events, asking for feedback is really like you're getting the audience engaged to co-create the work, right? And to complete it. So I think you're exactly right. I think artwork, creative output exists not on its own, but to start a conversation or kind of populate our imagination. So I think that part is very difficult it's hard, impossible to replace with AI, right? And I think also increasingly people are suspicious of things that look very generated, like very perfect. So for example, I come from Singapore, for example. We speak many languages, but none perfectly, right? We don't speak English perfectly. We don't speak Mandarin perfectly. We have quite heavy accents in every language that we speak. So the trouble is that now with generative AI, everyone sounds like a native English writer and speaker, but then you lose the
Yes.
local flavor, right? So in Singapore, we're known for Singapore English or Singlish, right? And it gives a lot of the authentic local feel, and even our foreigner friends or expatriate friends will pick up a few phrases. So I think there's also that sense of diversity, authenticity. I think also because I think the way we speak and write tells a backstory of where we come from, what is the geography or the history of where we come from. And I think when you flatten everything with AI, it then it's very hard for you to stand out, right? It's very hard for people to remember this podcast because you sound like a robot, with the perfect English or American accent, or I will sound like a robot, right? Like as though I'm like a Hollywood voice actor, not someone from Singapore. So I think that there's a lot of um, lessons that we can learn from AI. I think in terms of the fact that our imperfections are actually what makes us memorable, right? And makes us unique. What makes us relatable, right? Because no one speaks perfectly. Even if you're from the US, you will still have an accent from a particular part of the country. So I think that's the way I look at it. I think your experience in creating a logo is very telling, as in, I think AI can be very, very helpful, and I've found it very helpful sometimes, right? So, for example, if I need to turn out something very quickly, I don't need it to be very uh, creative or unique. I just need it for maybe it's an email, maybe it's a simple update on social media. But there are other kinds of output where I want it to have more of my voice, right? I want it to be more recognizable. So the project, the one thing I was known for before the AI book was that I was known as a photographer. I took a lot of iPhone photographs, black and white iPhone photographs of the Beijing Hutongs, which is a historic area around the Imperial Palace. And um, and the thing that I learned from taking those photographs is that the point is not how perfect I was technically, because I was using a small iPhone, an old iPhone 5. But it was that I was very recognizable. I have very distinct point of view and touch. And like that was what I was aiming for. So I wasn't thinking of buying a bigger camera, better camera, finding better ways to edit. But when I was ended up published, I was signed by an agent. I ended up publishing 2 books, my photography. When I was promoting the books, people always trying to ask you, what's your trick? What's the software what's the magic? In other words, it's like AI, what's the magic? What gave you the magical touch? When actually it was really just a very human effort at observation, right? You need to observe, you need to pay attention, you need to capture, you need to share and engage. So I think the same thing with AI, when you would try to use it to create art or create, whether it's design a logo or make a podcast. Yeah. How do you use AI in producing this podcast? Do you use it at
Um,
all?
I do actually. So there's some stuff that are helpful. And maybe you're not gonna like this because, for example, we use AI at the moment. Like with this software I'm using at the moment is Riverside, and they have AI integrated where they would be removing like the the filler words, stuff like this automatically. But from what I'm understanding from you is what people are resonating with is these actual the accents, the stuff that every human does, you know. But it became somehow such an industry practice or best practice to cut these out to make the pace just more engaging for some reason. And it's just like something that everybody's doing. If you open any YouTube podcast, you see like this is like cuts, and then like you jump through these imperfections, these things that make us sound more human. Maybe something for you when I read the title of your book, AI for Humanity. First of all, you have a beautiful cover. The cover of the book is one of the nicest ones I've seen. But whenever I read that title, the first thing that came to my mind is, how does AI makes us actually more human, in your opinion?
Interesting. Thanks for a compliment on the cover because I designed it. I designed it, but
very nice.
yeah, I didn't go to a wedding and ask for feedback. No. Unlike you, I didn't go.
Maybe I'm doing it wrong. I don't know.
I didn't do a focus group, but well, I think to answer your question, I think the way that AI has made me more aware of my humanity is that because I think I then have to think about, oh, if AI can do A, B, C parts of my job, then what is my value? How am I creating value? What makes me, what is something that AI cannot replace, right? So I think, and often you find that those are the very human things, right? The very, for example, it could be the ability to empathize, the ability to have common sense. You know, AI is famous, you know, for not having a lot of common sense. I think very importantly, the lived experience, right? That you have made mistakes, you have been taken, that you remember and calibrated. You understand the complexity of human nature, not by reading books, but by dealing with them. So like, for example, I lived and worked in very complex places where it's very complicated, right? Where human nature manifests itself in a very multifaceted way, whether it's China, Southeast Asia, India, the US. So I think, the way that AI has made me more aware of my humanity is really, it helped me reflect on what is it that AI cannot take away, right? What is it that AI cannot replicate? And I think it really heightens my awareness of my, I guess, emotional intelligence, my sense of reality, my common sense, my experience, so that it is a, one of the interesting things about my photography practice was that I find that I wasn't a photographer before the iPhone, but I was a producer for a long time. So when I picked up the iPhone, I found that I have a very trained visual instinct because I've seen so many images. I've seen so many frames of films and edited hundreds of hours of footage. So I think the same thing, I think there's a certain intuitive sense that's grounded in experience. So I think that's the way in which AI made me much more aware of my humanity, right? Because I think that um, what we find is that uh, in order to encode or instruct AI with everything that we know, it will take decades, right? Because I think one very simple example, for like AI is trained on data, right? And the reason why AI has become so powerful in the last 10, 15 years is because there's this explosion of data with the kind of development of internet, but also importantly, social media. So everyone on the planet is creating data now, right? Creating content, video, tweets, images, etc. But there's one gap. Let me ask you, what do you think the gap is? Let's talk about social media. What's the gap between social media data and the whole of the world?
That's a very interesting question. So the gap between social media and the whole of the world, maybe I would go with it's an imperfect reflection of what humanity is actually doing. Because when I see, for example, Instagram posts or also LinkedIn, everybody just inflating their personality, and they're not really sharing what they are actually going through. Especially if you look at LinkedIn, everybody's sharing about successes. It's like, oh, like we managed to raise this fund, or I just acquired a certificate. I just did this and did that. They don't show like, oh, I just went through a burnout. I just did, I cannot show up to work, or like these failures. Some people do, some people show, they try to be more authentic. But if you look in Instagram, at least like what I do is I always share when I'm in, I don't know, somewhere in a holiday with some beach, or I'm eating a very interesting food. It's
That's right.
never showing it's never showing what my everyday life and interactions actually look like.
Yeah,
I'm actually a very private person, funny enough.
yeah, me
Sorry.
too. Me too. I'm a very private person. So
Yeah.
I think that I think my question is really, I think, pointing out that AI models like ChatGPT or any of the generative models are trained on data, but data is an incomplete representation of the real world. Even though we have many, many, many times the data we used to have because of social media, because of internet, etc., because of computer processing power, but the data is an incomplete representation of the whole world. It's an incomplete representation of ourselves because we're only projecting the parts of ourselves that we want other people to see. So because of that, I think that AI can never fully displace human intelligence or wisdom. Because, like, for example, if I know you for a long time as a friend, I will know you beyond your social media posts, right? I will have some
Yes.
points of information that you told me in person that is not captured on photo, video, or social media posts. So I think in that sense, although there's a lot of data, and although AI has become very impressively good at analyzing and crunching the data, it's still incomplete, right? It's still a lopsided representation of the world. And I think in some ways, for example, when I was researching the book, I was really struck by the fact that most of the stories that we know are from the US and UK and China, right? US, parts of Europe, and China. But there are many stories from the rest of the world about AI ethics, AI development, AI use cases that are not represented, right? Not like you're not hearing use cases from uh, Africa or Latin America, or So I think that I think there are ways in which I feel that it's an incomplete representation of humanity, and the way to fill the gap is actually all of us telling our stories and kind of making our voices heard, guiding the AI as we interact with it. Yeah. So for example, do you feel like there are stories in maybe your own world that are not represented in social
I
media or AI?
definitely. Like you just touched a very good point. So as I said, so I'm originally from Syria, so I'm from a third world country, and when you're surrounded by news or updates from all over the world, which is usually more like West Europe focus, or maybe the US focus, or China, or all these big like players in the world, you feel like these stories are underrepresented. Like you don't hear people talking a lot about it. Unfortunately, when they do, sometimes it's in a negative kind of frame of work. Something is happening. For example, at the moment, unfortunately, there's a conflict in the Middle East. Maybe you've seen this kind of stuff. So it's always the representation of these countries and stories, unfortunately, is always in coordinates with something that is going on that is not good. And now I wonder how the AI is being trained on this information and what perspective the AI is doing regarding those countries. And it's something that's definitely concerning, and it's definitely something sad. It's a technical limitation problem because maybe the data is just so much gathered in these countries that it's gonna be biased. It's gonna be towards one side. I just hope that enough smart people sit down on this problem to try to find some intelligent solutions where they try to remove a little bit more bias of this data and try to make it like more transparent and more representative of everybody. I think it's a very strong technical limitation.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was reading this book. I am reading this book called Co-Intelligence. It's by an MIT professor called Ethan Mollick. And he has a very interesting example in his book where he talks about, let's say you ask the AI, whether it's a ChatGPT or some other model, to generate a random number between 1 and 100. 10% of the time, it will generate the number 42. Do you know why?
I cannot, no.
Yeah, because there's a very famous sci-fi novel called Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And in that book, there's this question of what's answer to ultimate secret in the universe or something. And the answer is 42. So therefore, 42 is like 10 times overrepresented in the data set. And that's just a very small example, right? I mean, just imagine, I think from what you've described, for instance, I can think of the fact that the ordinary is not represented. We have no idea what ordinary life in Syria or the Middle East or Africa is underrepresented because whenever it appears in data set, it's war or conflict or famine, So I think that's one of the issues. And I think therefore, in that sense, humans cannot complete. In that sense, I'm more aware of my humanity, right? In the sense that I can have friends like you. I have memories and ability to discover places and communities beyond what's in the data set of an AI model at any one point in time. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I don't know if I'm allowed to share this one sentence that I saw in the book that resonated with me very much. Is that something I'm allowed to share in this podcast?
Sure, of course, please do.
So this sentence, I'm going to read it out so I don't mess it. I don't mess it up. The saddest aspect of life is that science gathers knowledge faster than society gathers wisdom, by Isaac Asimov.
Yeah.
This statement just really resonated with me, and it seems to be the problem with not only AI but a lot of technologies that we had published recently. For example, social media. Social media has given us way more information, but the human wisdom is way slower to kind of adapt to these things. And then we are coming across divisions and misunderstandings and false use of technology. How does that statement, first of all, why did you add the statement in the book? How did it resonate with you?
Well, I think that, when we're talking about, for example, how AI made me more aware of my humanity and how even the best data set is an incomplete representation of the world or a skewed representation of the world. I think what we find is that, I think the gap that we're discovering is that AI models, they can improve at exponential rate, right? You can, like the current AI model that you have is always the worst model you will ever use because 1 month from now, 3 months from now, the model will have improved, it will be more explainable, it will be able to analyze more quickly, etc. But that's not the way that human nature or human wisdom function, right? We are attached to the past, right? We are slower to evolve. We have fears, we have vulnerabilities, we have to deal with trauma. So I think that's why the statement is in the book. Like the science will gather more knowledge, right? It can improve very quickly. It can improve at 0.1% a day or 0.01% a day. But human nature cannot keep up because we're human. We have attachments. We are reluctant to change because we're sentimental, because we have blind spots. So I think that there's this gap that's opening up, right? In terms of AI becoming better and better, but humans not adapting to that reality and also not being able to cope with our own, deal with our own fears and trauma. I think that's why that statement is so powerful. Yeah. How have you experienced it in your own life? Like, is there any one experience that made this really real for you?
For me, whenever I see, for example, social media, maybe not AI at the moment, I think it's really very tough to predict how things are going to be going. It's as you said, humans don't really understand exponential curves. We cannot really understand it, and I think it's maybe somehow brain limitation. We can see things that are linear. We can really explain linear improvements, but whenever something goes exponential, we just freak out. We just cannot understand how that might be. And I feel like generative AI and AI in general somehow is on an exponential curve. And that's why there are people who are saying like it's doomsday. There are people who are more optimistic. There are people, it's so tough to see what's going on. But regarding other technology, what I can judge, for example, about social media, it started as a good idea to connect people with each other from all over the world. Unfortunately, people are misusing it. If you go, for example, I don't know if it's just me, but I never seen the world more divided. And it really manifests on social media because there's no accountability. Anybody can say whatever they want. Maybe LinkedIn is one of the social media platforms where things are a little bit still more controlled because it's kind of connected to your professional profile. So there is some accountability. You cannot just say stuff that nobody would know that you said it. And somehow it's bringing the worst in humans in certain cases. It's bringing the best in humans in other cases. So this is where I see social media as being a little bit tough pill to swallow at the moment. And we need to level up the human wisdom to use this technology in a more productive way.
Yeah, it's interesting because the chapter 2 of the book is called The AI Trap, and it focuses on social media, right? So it focuses on the idea of the spread of disinformation, deep fakes, and how our ignorance, how the fact that we are not aware of how we're influencing the social media algorithms and how the algorithms are trapping us in kind of bubbles or echo chambers is affecting the way that we look at the world. Because right now, it's actually very hard to get at something that are just the facts, right? Everything is kind of through this frame, that it's very hard to get straight news anymore because you only get it through social media, right? You only get it from people whom you already agree with. So there's not the same exposure, or you have to kind of wrestle with things that you don't like or people that you don't like. And I think that's one way in which, we're talking about AI and the risk of AI. There's a lot of AI embedded in social media in terms of the recommendation algorithms, in terms of who you friend and what content you see. But the thing is that social media has been around for 10, 15 years, about, 15, 20 years now. If you think about mid 2020s or early 2020, early 2000s or mid 2000s. It's been almost 2 decades, but our legislation or our ability to govern social media is still not up to it. We're still grappling with how to legislate, how to govern. And I think AI has just made it exponentially harder, I think.
I totally agree. Fun fact, when I talked to you off camera and I said, I'm currently working in a wholesaler company and what we built for them is actually recommender systems. So I hope I'm not contributing to the problem. But at least what we try to do is the actual problem is very interesting. You need people to find something that are related to. So like we would recommend, for example, products that are interesting. And when this problem and solution manifests its way in a good thing, for example, Spotify do this very nicely, where they would recommend new music for you that maybe you haven't heard before. And it happened to me multiple times where Spotify recommended something and I was like, wow, this is genius. And I would never have came across it unless it recommended it for me. Or for example, maybe Amazon do it also in a nice way where they recommend other stuff that you can also buy when you buy certain things. When it comes to social media, I think the biggest problem, it started from something maybe innocent. We want people to see more relevant content for them. We want to recommend stuff for them. and it turned into building silos and bubbles and people just seeing stuff that reinforcing whatever they have as ideology or whatever ideas they have. It really now isolated us from having different perspectives. And unfortunately, we have this confirmation bias. We would always love to hear people saying what we believe is the truth. And it's maybe painful to hear different opinions. And social media now has become this platform. Again, the technology was probably made in good faith, and then the manifestation of it, because we lack the foresight to see how things might affect us as a society, we now landed in this big silos where everybody is just so divided because they keep hearing the same positive information about their own thoughts.
Yeah, I think whatever what we're discussing now is exactly what we talk about in the book, right? How do we become more aware of our decisions? How do we escape the AI trap, right? In terms of, I think it's also that we are taking everything that we receive through the recommendation system algorithms as reality, the truth, right? We're not taking into account that, actually the algorithm is trying to influence me to press like or comment or buy something or vote for someone. I think because I was writing the book, I became very aware, for example, if I go on an e-commerce platform, how the platform is constantly trying to get me to buy something and how I can mislead the algorithm into giving me discounts because I give it the impression that I'm going to buy something. And that
Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's because of people like you.
I'm so sorry.
that they're trying to, she's very close to buying something. Let's give her a discount. So I realized I can get a bigger discount if I keep giving giving them the impression that I'm very, very, very interested. I'm very close to pressing the pay button or mobile payment button. But no, I think it's really about I think recommendation algorithms is only a subset of AI or the whole AI, universal AI applications. So I think in the book, we talk about how this lack of awareness that we're not aware of this very complex interplay between human decision and action and algorithm and how it's trying to influence us. I think the most stark examples obviously is in politics where the algorithm can maybe push disinformation to you or give you an impression about a certain candidate or a certain decision that is completely divorced from reality or facts. So I think that that's one thing that we talk about in the book. And of course, it's made much harder now with deep fakes and generative AI. But the interesting thing is that sometimes it's not really how good the fake is, though. It's not how good the deep fake is. People will believe it because of confirmation bias, not because it's such a great deep fake, but because it confirms what they already believe about the world, which is, I think, the more insidious thing than the high quality deep fake that we worry about. Yeah. It's just that it confirms that narrative you already bought into. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. Since we've been talking about the risks of AI, maybe something on the positive side. You talk a lot in your book about how to build a sustainable AI for the future, for the humanities. Can you give us maybe some insights of what are the things that we should really focus on to not mess this up?
Well, the book is about really this paradigm shift, what we call the paradigm shift from AI as usual to AI for humanity, right? So I think in terms of AI as usual is really along three dimensions in terms of governance, technology, and commercialization. So I think the governance is just like managing AI like any other technology that we've seen, whether it's software or something else like steam engine or car or things like that. So managing AI like any other technology is the old way. And then the technology dimension, which I think your audience might resonate with, is the preoccupation with building the bigger, faster, better AI model, like with more parameters, more accuracy, more data. So I think the focus on building the best, most impressive machine learning model, prediction model, is also quite, I think, misleading, can be quite misguided. And then a commercialization model dimension is really about focusing only on profits, right? Only on generating the most profits possible for the big companies, especially. So I think what we call sustainable AI for humanity, first, in terms of governance, is to really focus on nurturing AI with more wisdom, right? Not so much in terms of managing it like any technology that's static, but really to nurture it, because AI evolves, right? Even the ChatGPT model that I use every day, or Claude or any other model, I noticed that it has changed. It has like evolved. It has become more capable. It has become more able to meet my brief, etc. So the fact that we need to nurture it with some measure of wisdom is important. In terms of technology, I think we advocate for not just focusing on the AI, but focusing on what we call human AI symbiotic intelligence, as in to design it so that the human is at the center of it. So, for example, when you talk about coding your recommender system, is to make sure that you are not just doing autopilot with the AI from beginning to the end, but we design it so that someone like you, an engineer, a data scientist, is there to nurture it, guide it, to check on it throughout the whole process. So that's human AI symbiosis, right? And also to manage all the stakeholders, all
Yeah,
the
that's
clients, the
that's the fun
government,
part.
the all those the fun, the torturous part. And
The
then of
torturous
course,
part,
in
yes.
terms of the commercialization, to come up with alternative models than just kind of a few players dominating, whether it's a big tech or whether it's really just venture capitalists trying to make more short-term gains from investing in certain models. So I think you need to have other stakeholders, whether it's actually government, whether it's actually non-profit, where they might develop something that has no immediate revenue model or profit. You know, it could be something that the society needs. For example, it could be mental health, it could be education that does not generate the most revenue, but
Yeah.
at the same time, we need to solve the problem now. Right? Or it could be like fake news or disinformation, right? For the social media companies on their own, they want to drive engagement through their recommendation algorithms. But for the society as a whole, both from the point of view of government, from the point of view of civil society, from the point of view of individual users, you don't want to maximize profit. You don't want to maximize engagement at the expense of mental health, at the expense of truth and social cohesion. Yeah.
So as you know, most of my audience are maybe AI researchers, people working with the development of AI and putting things out there that is more for like production. If you have a message for us as an AI practitioners, what what message would you send to my audience?
Well, I think it's really to, it's interesting because I think that to really think about not just how good your system is, because I think in production, I'm a filmmaker, so I used to work in TV production. So as a TV producer, you're very focused on, like the quality, the technical quality, how beautiful is this image, how good is the sound, how clean is the sound. I think my message is really that you should think, besides the technical quality of your production system, you need to think about the impact on people, right? So, for example, whether your model is accurate or not, the impact is very different between an e-commerce recommendation system as opposed to a cancer diagnosis system, right? So, for example, you recommend the your recommendation is not the best for e-commerce, it doesn't have the same impact if you make a wrong diagnosis for a disease. So I think to really think about what is the impact here if it's mistaken or it's inaccurate, right? Sometimes, for example, you may want to make it be more conservative because the impact is greater. So, for example, if it's a cancer diagnosis, you might want to get someone to do a test, even though the person may not be kind of cancer positive, because the impact of a false negative is greater than a false positive, right? So if it's a deadly disease, you want. So I think to think about, number one, think about the impact of the person using it. Think about the impact of inaccuracy and how you should calibrate, not just the technical quality of the output. And I think the other thing that I think is very important is to kind of think about all the ethical, how you're influencing decisions, right? And if you were to use it yourself, is that the decision that you will make, right? Is that something that so I think that that's interesting in terms of measuring not the technical quality but the human impact of your system that you're producing, and to put yourself, like, think about if you're using it or if someone in your family is using it, would you still use the system, right? Will you have any hesitation or doubt, right, in using the system? Uh, I don't know. How would you, for example, for what you do, have you ever hesitated because of the ethical implications, or you think that what you do is quite mainstream and you don't need to consider it?
That's a very valid question. So what we're doing is we have a very specific customers, and so the ethic part of it is that we are trying to help the customers find something that would benefit their business in a way that they didn't think of before. And that's why we try to recommend stuff for you that maybe you haven't bought on a daily basis. And my company has a very interesting business model where usually you have like big hotels and restaurant chains. They always kind of buy the same things. And what we're trying to show them is like, maybe this would be an interesting alternative, maybe cheaper, maybe better. And when you see it from that perspective, we are trying to help the customers achieve more or increase their conscious horizon to other products that might be interesting to them. I see this as like me bringing value to the customer. I always imagine the Spotify example, that Spotify showed me a music piece that I wasn't aware of. And now that piece became part of my daily life because I really like that song. And if I see it that way, I never have hesitation because I would definitely use it. And I'm using recommender systems. If I was working maybe for Facebook and I know that anything I'm publishing might cause some social change or social tension, then that's a different question. And definitely when we were working in the medical industry, I think I mentioned it to you in the past, we developed AI systems to classify cancer images. And there, the implication and the ethics is way higher. So you really need to know, should I build my model to be more conservative? Maybe it would be even better for the person to, if it gets like a false positive or something like this, to get somebody involved rather than just saying like, no, you don't have the cancer, or you do have the cancer, or whatever situation that the model is outputting. So I totally agree with you. Always think of how is this impacting the people. This is something we're always trying to balance. Unfortunately, sometimes you do get some pressure from business to perform. It is like sometimes if the model performing 90% is better than having something that is 70% plus a human, depends on the use cases. So I think this is our job, to educate people on the impact and implication. But from that side, I totally agree with your messaging.
Yeah, I think to sum up very quickly, I think one is, if you're developing a system or producing a system, first ask yourself not just how good the technical quality output is or how accurate, but what's the impact on the human that is using it. Secondly, imagine if you put someone you care about, whether it's yourself or a family member or a loved one, as the customer on this journey, will you still be comfortable with the setting that you've kind of the system that you've designed? And thirdly, what can you do to help your clients and your different stakeholders to think more about the first two questions that you're thinking about, that they kind of are on the same page as you, because often they are not. They have other pressures, but most people can be persuaded if you put it to them in a way that matters to their bottom line, right? So
Yeah. Siok, thank you so much for this interview, this conversation. This
thank
is
you.
something that's a little bit different than what we usually do. But it was very insightful to remind ourselves that whatever we're building, whatever we're working with has impact to humans. And I think my audience would really resonate with this messaging, is that we are building stuff for humans, and always try to remember that is basically the case, and try to be more thoughtful about things. And hopefully that would influence the design decisions that goes into these systems, and we don't fall into problems that we are facing at the moment in our society. So thank you again for this very insightful conversation. I had amazing time talking to you. Maybe for people who want to know more about you, where they can find you, maybe we could say the name of the book one more time, AI for Humanity.
Well, AI for Humanity, obviously you can find it on Amazon, at any of the websites where you can buy books. But I also noticed that it's in many libraries in Germany. So if you are a library user, you can search for the book in your library, or you can request for it. It's at many of the university libraries. Germany is one of our top. By the way, we are in 21 countries across 5 continents, in the top libraries of many universities and think tanks. So you can buy a copy of the book on online, or you can ask your library to add it to your collection. Both will make me very happy. If you want to connect with me on social media, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter at Siok. It's just SIOK Tan. You can find me anywhere. It's a pretty unique name. If you want to follow my photography, you can go to Siok 2x on Instagram. So that's where you can find me.
Perfect. I will add all this information in the bio so people can definitely know where to reach out.
Thanks so much.
Thank you one more time, and I wish you a lovely day. Thank you for being on my podcast.
You too.